Welcome to the Weekend Sports Cars on the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires. And you know who else it's presented by? My main man, Graham Goodwin of DailySportsCar.com. How are you, my time zone traveling friend?
Yes, heavy-eyed. It's as we record this, it's late evening in the UK. Back in at the first sparrows yawn this morning at Heathrow Airport on the way back from Tokyo via Hong Kong. But good to be home. We'll sleep well tonight, but looking forward to another hour and a half of fun and games with our listeners.
We have a whole heck of a bunch of great questions. Thank you all to everyone from Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook for sending in a bunch of wonderful things for us to get into here, and also for those who took Graham's suggestion to heart and compacticized and shorticized, who tidied up some of the length of some of the questions so they flow off of our tongues. So we'll get into those in just a minute. Obviously, Graham, we have big season finale for IMSA at Petit Le Mans, which went down last weekend. One of just the best, truly the best 10-hour Petit Le Mans events at Road Atlanta that I've ever seen. A true thriller to the not just final lap, but final seconds of the final lap. You were in Japan for the Fuji FIA WEC round. I know that you were busy there, not only working to report on the event, but also trying to learn some future-leaning things. Before we get into our questions, definitely need to bow our heads and or take a solemn moment or two. We've had a couple of unfortunate losses in our general world. One specific in photographer John Thawley, who I met for the first time when I just transitioned into this new career in 2006. And based on a lot of what I've read on Facebook from those who considered him a friend, there's some pretty strong eulogies and a lot of folks who are not only sad to see John's death, apparently lost a fight to cancer, but also those who were either inspired by him, considered him to be a good friend and ally, someone who was often ready to offer advice to those who asked or were wanting to get into motor racing photography. So looking at what others have had to say about John Graham, it seems like there are many people who really were quite fond of him.
It's a small family. Any kind of journalistic and photographic community is a small family, and the IMSA family, and John was certainly a big part of that, was a particularly tight-knit community. And I, like you, have seen the outpourings of tributes to John. He'd been ill for quite some time. It's an unpleasant way to lose your life, but he's been battling away, and unfortunately, I'm afraid this was one battle he didn't win. So, rest in peace.
We've also had here locally in the Bay Area a corner worker that was killed, although I've read online the person's identity, and he and I were actually Facebook friends. His name is yet to be named officially, either by local authorities or the track itself, so I will refrain from that. But we've had a corner worker who died during a private track day at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. Another dark cloud on what seems to be a fairly heavy time. And then a friend of mine, Danny Baker, lost his father, Danny, who I've only gotten to know recently. He's very good friends with Tommy Kendall and many others. Danny being a longtime racer, we've done some fun in-car footage things with his old Lotus Formula Junior car. We're going to do some more here sometime soon, and his ex-Gilles Villeneuve Ferrari Formula One car. But Danny, his father, was a big racer, got him into the sport, so Danny's grieving as well. And heavier times than we would want, no matter what, Graham, but also just great to see that in these times, and I can attest to even some of the personal difficulties experienced on the home front here, the amount of support has been phenomenal. So we have that. We have the confirmation of the AIM Autosport and Vassar Sullivan takeover of the Lexus RCF GT3 IMSA program.
And we've got questions about that. And actually, kudos to yourself, my friend. Put together a substantial chunk of that jigsaw. More than a month ago? Certainly the Vassar Sullivan side.
Yeah, even an old dog like me can find a bone on occasion. And then have just had some really fun and interesting conversations with those who took part at Petit Le Mans, gaining a little bit of knowledge as to why Ford, for example, really fell back in the closing hour or so and lost out on the potential of a championship there. Spoken with some of the champions, trying to do some shorter version podcasts just to have those conversations. So lots of things moving, my friend. And speaking of moving, why don't we go ahead and jump right into our 6 pages of organized questions, and we're going to keep going with the theme that we've done in the past week or two of sorting things into basically a general category, IMSA, and then ACO/WEC, and if there are enough, into an SRO/GT3-ish type category as well. So, shall you lead us off, my man?
Well, let's kick off with a bit of ACO world stuff, and that's because delighted to actually bring news today to DSC and to Racer with a significant set of updates to do with what's taken quite a bit of a beating lately. The car. We talk about car, hypercar, call it what you will, and now we know a lot more about the proposals, the timeframes, the budgets, and indeed what it's going to be called. We'll come to that. Yes, not going to be GT, but GT face, by the way. But we'll come to that in a moment. We do know that the regulations will be submitted to the FIA for approval in early December, and they've had an outline in the latest meeting, and that went pretty well. We know as well that in anticipation of that time frame coming forward, that a high-powered delegation are visiting a number of manufacturers at board level. 3 so far done, 4 more to come before December. The interesting part of that, now, you can reasonably well guarantee that amongst those are going to be the 3 manufacturers that we know are probably closest to this. Toyota more or less confirmed that they will. Aston Martin, I think, are pretty convinced they'd like to. McLaren, you and I have both spoken to Zach Brown. He's said various things around that. So those 3.
You're saying Zach Brown has said things about things. I've never heard such an allegation before.
It's normally so difficult to get a comment out of. But
it's early in the show for me to be taking the piss out of things, so I apologize. But hey, there we go.
But the really interesting part of this is that of the 7 that we know are currently programmed, it may end up being more, 3 of them were manufacturers that asked for that presentation that have not so far been part of the technical group that have been discussing the regulations. So what's happened as this has developed is there's effectively, I guess you'd call it, a kind of high-powered mailing list where the details of the regulations, the formats, the concept behind this hypercar format were being shared with stakeholders, if you like, potential partners, and 3 of those major manufacturers have asked for that presentation. That right there could be the really exciting part of this. It might just be that 1 or more of those come out of the woodwork, and whether or not it be in year 1 or year 2, then perhaps we'll start to see some different names actually emerging than those that have been circulating lately. In terms of what the concept's going to be, basic concept is the same as we already knew. It's going to be a pure racing chassis with styling cues that will equate these things to hypercar road cars, something like a 700 horsepower normal engine with no restrictions on engine architecture, so more or less anything can meet the performance window.
I'm going to opt for a V1. Yes,
I think you should go for it
right there.
And by the way, in answer to the question that always comes up when this thing, yes, indeed, you could have a rotary motor if you wanted it. And then the other part of it, and I guess one of the cleverer parts of this, is that, yes, they will be hybridized. There will be a single, something like 270 horsepower hybrid drive on the front axle, but that will be cost capped. And not cost capped in terms of what it costs you to develop it. That's up to you. Cost capped in terms of the fact that every one of those hybrid systems, whether or not it's Toyota, Aston Martin, whoever else comes, has to be available to customers. That is part of the regulation, and has to be available to them at €2 million for a season for 2 cars. So they're trying to keep this to 2-car teams, and they're trying to get to the stage where you open up a customer marketplace. The final bit of cleverness, if you think about it that way, is the restrictions that are going to be placed on the performance window. So in other words, the performance window has been designed to be a little slower than the current Le Mans hybrids, a little quicker than the LMP2s currently, which will probably have to be adjusted back a little to accommodate that performance window comfortably. But with the package that we're talking about there, the engine and the hybrid drive together, that should be reasonably easy for a competent manufacturer and a competent team to manage, which means that spending a lot more than for a factory, about €20 million, for a privateer, probably closer to 16, that every one of those should be able to be competitive, that there are regulations that allow evolutions to recover lost ground should you be in that position after year one. But the key to this is that you can go out, you can spend 250 million if you want to, but you still won't go any faster. That's the point, that if you want to go and spend it on fripperies like, I don't know, wages, that would be nice. That if you wanted to do that, you're more. In other words, you're more than able within regulations to go out and employ an Adrian Newey on a gazillion euro bucks. But the reality is that won't allow you to sidestep the performance parameters laid down for the class. So what we've now got is a very much more well-filled rule book. We've got the key bits and bobs that go with it. There is still some work being done on the final capabilities and costings for those hybrid drive systems. But the reality now is that we're rather closer than I think a lot of people thought to a meaningful set of regulations that will be in place in time for manufacturers already engaged in the process to get stuck in and get a car built in time for September 2020, and for others potentially to think about joining it in year 2 perhaps, because the beauty of that concept, because you've got such a tight performance window, is that there's less of a challenge for a manufacturer to join in year 2 or even year 3 of the regulations. 5 years of regulations, they will then overlap with the ones that follow, which are the regulations that involve zero emissions race cars. That's yet to be determined as to how that knits together. Lots of other questions I know from the listeners that I'm sure will come in time for next week's show. I'm very happy to do what I can to fill any gaps. But for me, having got in there being a constructive critic of what was being proposed, I came out of there, the conversations that I actually had at Fuji, feeling pretty confident that they've actually engaged well with the people that have taken the time. I am very encouraged indeed. There are other manufacturers coming forward and saying, actually, for the money, that's something we'd like to hear a little bit more about.
Well, that's brilliant stuff, Graham. And I'll throw in 2 quick things. We'll be interested to hear aerodynamic philosophies for car and whether the extreme downforce that the current LMP1 cars are capable of producing will be slashed or cut in a meaningful way once we get to the actual cars on the ground. Reason being, think of this year's shift in IndyCar to the new Universal Aero Kit which cut somewhere between 1,000 to 1,200 pounds of downforce off of the cars in maximum downforce trim, and what that did. We had a situation where the cars are turning lap times at some tracks that were faster than the previous insane manufacturer aero kits and just crushed the cars into the ground. We're faster in some places, a little bit slower at some of the tracks where extreme, medium to high speed cornering made up a decent part of the lap. But what was really interesting to see in that, Graham, which is where I'm curious on the car side, is if we're talking roughly 700-ish internal combustion horsepower, 200, 250-ish electric horsepower, we're not that far away from 1,000, which is roughly where we're at now in hybrid. If you then consider, if the weight of the vehicle is similar and aerodynamics possibly are dialed down just a little bit, even if we're off a tiny bit on horsepower, even if weight's gone up just a little bit, we might not be that far away from LMP1 hybrid times. Granted, it's the only thing that would be different is just how that speed is made per lap. In the blast down a long straight at Le Mans, for example, top speed should definitely be up. Again, there are a lot of other factors. Is there going to be fuel flow restriction per lap and all this other thing? I hope not. But we could have a scenario where lap times aren't too crazily different simply because losses and gains, we could very well be up in mile per hour, but in straight line scenarios, down a little bit in the corners and come somewhere near a wash. So,
well, it's envisaged at Le Mans that they'll be somewhere in the 320 to 324 brackets, and my impression, you're quite right, by the way, there are going to be pretty serious restrictions on aerodynamics. And one thing I'd say, if you do look at Racer or DSC with a story there are some indicative artistic impressions of the way these cars might look. They've come out of the process, the rule-making process, so they're not, and you'll see that there are some that do look like some of the makes that have been engaged with the process. They are not provided as, this is what a McLaren hypercar might look like, or a Toyota or a BMW might look like. They're provided to show you the kind of opportunities that might be there, and the way in which the aerodynamics will be maintained at that kind of level of controlled efficiency will be there are certain areas of the car that will be controlled by regulation. So you're not going to be able to develop those areas of the car, which tend to be the ones that are very sensitive in terms of generating the kind of trick downforce that you describe with the IndyCar side of things, because that tends to be where the big money comes. There'll also be some restrictions, by the way, on set testing in season and indeed out of season. And the other big thing, and this, it was a surprise when I heard it the first time. I did hear it the first time not at Spa, but it now has been confirmed to me, is that we are going to be talking about a single tyre supplier in the new LMP1 class. Now, that makes sense in a couple of ways. I know that's disappointing for the likes of yourself and myself that like the pure competition. It does make sense in a couple of ways, particularly if you're there trying to control cost and particularly to control development. That if you've actually got one product or at least one supplier, that does tend to kind of reduce the overheads in terms of the infrastructure that's actually required. It will be a one-size-fits-all solution. I'm absolutely certain of that. It's going to be interesting. It's a very different way for the ACO to go racing with their top class. And I'm going to be very interested to hear, once this becomes more widely known, exactly what in particular the professional motorsport teams in sports car racing have got to say about it. There will inevitably, by the way, be the questions about why not DPI. For me, it's not dramatically different from the DPI concept. For me, the major difference here, this is around the ACO and the FIA looking to expand the reach of effectively the Le Mans product onto a global platform. To do that, you need the manufacturers. There's no doubt about that. To get the manufacturers, you've got to listen to what the manufacturers do and don't want. And those are lessons that have been learned in the hardest way possible with the loss of both Audi and Porsche to global endurance racing at the top prototype level. Let's wait and see. For now, I think we've had the level of cynicism that's gone with some of the debate about new rule sets. I think now it's time to get behind this and see whether or not the apparent interest from some of the manufacturers transfers into, let's say by spring next year, to the announcement of intended or indeed solid programs. I hope it does, because looking at the way those cars might look, the thought of 6, 8, 10 of those battling away in a top class for overall honours at WC races and Le Mans 24 Hours, I think could actually be something that turns some heads.
I love the big car update to kick off the show, Graham, and I would be remiss if I didn't say, nice job, my friend, knowing that Daily Sports Car, from what I heard, Daily Sports Car and a few other trusted outlets were indeed just that, entrusted to sit down and try and learn things ahead of time, and to then hold those bits of information until the agreed upon release time. And that being said, we could also state, without naming outlets, that there were some who were not trusted to be read in on this, and have been forced to rely on whatever official releases come out. So anyways, just good to know that we can trust you with at least one thing so far. Here's two.
Well, here's the two. Here's the second, because actually I did say that I'd let people know about what it's going to be called. That's actually not going to be up to the ACO or the FIA. It's going to be up to you, the listeners, and you, the readers, because in the new year, there's going to be some form of, I don't want to call it a ballot, some form of process whereby something up to around 10 options will be put out there. Now, look, this
fan
is not
boost.
Gonna...
It's Le Mans fan boost.
I think you can reasonably imagine that some of the keywords that you can imagine, including hypercar, hybrid, Le Mans, will be there in probably multiple formats. But the upside here is you'll get the opportunity to actually express an opinion. You won't necessarily get that opinion, adopted, but they are trying to engage. And again, we could be cynical. We will be cynical, but the reality here is they're trying to do something a little bit different. I think what you're dealing with here is a governing body that's been pretty badly bruised by the last couple of years. But the upside is what they're not doing is putting on the armor and putting down the visor. They are listening. They're listening to the industry. They're listening to the people they trust in the marketplace, and they are listening to the voice of the people that pay on the turnstiles. I think that's a good thing.
Clarence. It shall be known as Clarence. All right. Well, we have a whole bunch of questions to get to. Since we have kicked off here in ACO land, let's stay. And I know that we have, I believe, more IMSA than ACO, so we might be able to get through ACO somewhat quickly before jumping over to my little world.
Well, on the back of what was a spectacular Petit Le Mans, that's barely a surprise. But we did have the action in Japan. There's been a number of things that have come out from that. So let's just kick off with one of them. It's come from a couple of people to do with the post-race penalties. Third WC race in succession where we've seen post-race penalties affecting the results. Dempsey Proton Racing are both cars penalised, and a further investigation into a potential tampering with the fuel fill data logger. So let's wait. We're going to have to wait and see what happens this side of Shanghai for that. But Scott Christie and our good mate Trevosaurus, sounds like a lispy sort of thing, on the Reddit WC group. Scott asking, with Dempsey Proton allegedly tampering with fueling sensor, how serious an offence is it? Is it straight up disqualification from the race? Possible fine? Will it have further repercussions? The second question, again, similar kind of thing. Why did they not get disqualified? Surely tampering with the system warrants that. An example made to the rest of the grid. How can ACO maintain security of the data logging systems, this crucial part of the performance of the car. Surely it's possible to hide half a second saved here or there with the various pit stop times. Well, look, to explain, the penalty already inflicted measured the extent to which they were under the minimum pit stop time and quadrupled that. So they didn't just get the time chucked back into the mix, they quadrupled that, and that did lose the 88 car a podium position. The 77 car was much delayed anyway, so it didn't really make very much of a difference there. As to what you could do about it, I guess that depends on just exactly how it's been tampered with. I will say this: I like Dempsey Proton, I like Toyota Gazoo Racing, and for that matter, I quite like TDS Racing too. These are good people, but clearly always looking for an available performance edge. If, however, a mandatory system has been tampered with, I would be surprised if disqualification did not follow. I think what we're trying to find out with the investigation is just the method and the extent to which there was, if indeed there was, any tampering. And I would expect that if that does come back with an answer in the affirmative, that there's going to be pretty big trouble for Dempsey Proton Racing, which is a pretty big deal, bearing in mind they won Le Mans this year and they lead the World Championship. So we'll wait and see. This is not being taken lightly. Having spoken to some of the race officials about the previous record of disqualifications, etc., and then for this to hit us again, I suspect there's going to be rather more concerted action, which might well involve bringing all the teams into a room, barring the doors, removing the biscuits and the coffee, and saying sharp words, because this is now a point where this does risk the reputation of the World Championship. And, even on a very personal note, I'm getting pretty bored of not being able to leave a press room until the small hours of the morning because we haven't yet got an official response. So if you're listening, guys, cut it out. I need my beauty sleep. If you see me, you really know I really do need my beauty sleep. It has become something of a plague, and I'm very keen for it to stop. But the reality in most of these cases are this has been positive action by teams or individuals involved in teams because they believe there is a way around the rule book. For now, Dempsey Proton lose some points. They lose a little bit of the trust of the officials concerned. In just a few weeks' time, by the time the race stewards are given the report back from their technical delegates, we'll find out whether or not that goes further than that. My suspicion is if they do find that what has been done is what is described as likely having been done, there will be further sanctions, I'm sure.
So one thing, dear listeners, that we have tried to adjust to is one question, one answer, meaning instead of Graham and I weighing in on every single question, we try to limit ourselves where possible to one answer per question, so that way we can get through more questions. Just apologize here because we've got a couple right up front where both of us are weighing in, but we'll try and get back to that one answer to each question format. Graham, I'll just throw this in quickly, and then I'll grab a couple more on ACO side. In every single motor race that takes place throughout the world, 2 wheels, 4 wheels, boats, planes, I don't care, someone's trying to cheat. Folks always have. I am admittedly struggling a little bit to think of what it is that I might have done. I'm sure I tried to cheat somewhere at some point in time. It has happened for more than 100 years in every racing series, professional and amateur. What I am struggling to grasp in relation to our friends at the ACO and the FIA WEC is how something has changed to the point to where cheating and or malfeasance is now something that apparently must be treated with kid gloves slowly. Oh my god! Oh, we'll get back to you in 3 months to let you know. 4 months. Who won Le Mans? And oh my goodness! And look, there's nothing new here. I realize the technology involved is certainly very high and if not outright complex, but trying to circumvent what is believed to be refueling regulations. Look, man, we're not talking about we need to get NASA on the job to try and decrypt all the crazy things that have been done with a handle, the dead man refueling portion of this, or some of the other things here. Cheating is a normal part of racing, and I wish I understood what has changed, the mindset shift that has turned whatever has been caught or alleged or feared to have been done in a FIWC round. I would love to know what has turned this into oh boy, this is going to be a long drawn out thing. It isn't that complicated elsewhere, which makes me wonder why it has become a constant issue here. So let's see. I'm going to go with a couple of here that are in the same general sphere. One from Ben Ireland, one from Johnny Austin. Ben says, given that the non-hybrid P1s lose time in traffic, is it realistic to expect them to develop their engines to produce an outright faster lap than Toyota, which will then equalize during the race as Toyota's hybrids kick in? And then Johnny says, is Toyota's dominance over the non-hybrid privateers slowly killing LMP1? No new LMP1 teams announced for next year. Who can or wants to compete? ? Can they just move to DPIs for a few years so we can have an actual contest? Ben, again, I think if we're just looking at the costs involved, current costs involved, and the fact that we have a pending formula shift here where a lot of money is going to be spent, at this stage, I would be reluctant to ask the AERs and any of the privateer, the Cosworths, even a Mechachrome, any of those who are supplying privateer P1 engines to try and do something more going forward. And also, I would be reluctant to ask Toyota to do too much, knowing, again, that we have a formula shift coming very soon. If that shift was 3 years away, I might ask if there was more that could be done during the off-season. Also, Graham, with this super season construct, that off-season is next summer. So yep. I know that there's a bit of a break here. Obviously, there's a bit of a break coming up, but still, some odd timing, Ben, so I wouldn't think we'd be able to do too much there. Johnny, for the question of dominance and killing LMP1, I don't disagree that it's not exactly fun. I just can't find a way I would apportion any of that blame to Toyota. I would do the opposite and say, hey, you guys were given a perfect opportunity to say, oop, looks like the P1 hybrid ship is sinking, we're getting off too. And instead they've chosen to not only stay, but even, between practice and qualifying, acquiesce to desired equivalence of technology changes to try and slow their cars at their home race at Fuji even more to try and make a better show. So, yeah, I don't like you. Go ahead, Graham.
I can add this part of it. We've talked ad infinitum on the show about the lack of transparency of reasoning behind equivalent technology and balanced performance. Made some distinct headway there, and I hope to have something I can tell you in the coming weeks about a dialogue that's underway now about helping the transparency of that process. But the thing that surprised me, even in the wake of the mid-session EOT changes we got in Free Practice 3, was the level of unhappiness with the LMP1 privateer teams. Why? Because, at peak ability, they're running as hard as they can for the reliability and the abilities that their engines have got. However, they're not getting enough fuel to do that through the full stints, which means they've got to lift and coast. So the big moan, if you like, from the LMP1 privateers is, you're not allowing us to run at our peak ability. Effectively, the 26 kilos for Toyota is one thing, but even with the changes that they got mid-meeting, the LMP1 privateers have got a substantial amount more, apparently, that they could actually accommodate that would help them to get that little bit closer. The reality is they lost that race by 3 laps. We know that it was unlikely we would get a meaningful shift before Toyota's home race at Fuji. I think we've got a reason to believe that there's a day of reckoning coming here, and the day of reckoning is, are the rule makers going to be prepared to make a substantial change in time for Shanghai? If they're not, then reasonably speaking, the privateers will know that they've got what they've got within a percentage point either way for the remainder of the life of this formula. I don't think it's going to be enough to keep them.
I'm going to jump to a question from Eric Rucker sent in via Reddit, and thank you, Eric, who mentions also, you don't have to try and pronounce my username, which is BHTOOEFR, Butoofer. I think. I have no idea, but at least I didn't completely murder that. So at the end of last week's show, friends, I forget what enticement I offered, but I think it was the person who asks the first question in haiku form will get it posed first. Clearly I've lied, so Eric, I don't know, maybe I can send you a stick or something to make up for, I guess, proposing something that I forgot about and didn't stick to till you just reminded me I asked for haiku. All right. He says, variable valves can't be found in the WEC, but why? Even cheap cars have them! Exclamation point. Talking about variable valve technology. And Eric says, I'd think Koenigsegg would want to be able to show off their free valve technology, something we mentioned a few weeks ago. And it's my understanding that Toyota was forced into a turbocharged engine due to things that VVT would have helped with. Back to Car 2020, whatever fans are going to call it, Graham. I'm hoping this is something, well, I'm hoping that Koenigsegg is on the grid with a car and able to show off their free valve technology, and Toyota could go the VVT route. And yeah, great question, Eric, and also one of those perennial questions that I ask myself. Hey, there's cool things happening in the automotive world. What would happen if we actually put them under the duress of hardcore endurance competition? We could find out more, maybe advance the state of the art, and then pass it back to the road vehicles.
Well, here you go, Marshall.
Hold out hope it'll be part of Car.
Here's a quick little soundbite or word bite, if you like, from a briefing document that's been supplied to the technical working group moving forward for Car. Diversity of engines, quote, all architectures are potentially competitive. They are not putting restriction on what you can put under the engine cover. They're putting restriction on the power that engine produces. So maybe this is the point at which some of those differing engine architectures and equipment might actually come forward. The Koenigsegg thing, they've expressed some interest in it. It remains to be seen whether or not this is something which will get those boutique hypercar manufacturers involved in. But it's a very good question. Maybe this is the moment that actually they try something a bit different.
Here's a question I believe some folks smarter than I posed when the Super Season was presented as a thing. And you might have even answered this back then, but it's fallen out of my brain. Enrique Brand says, how are the driver rankings going to work in the WEC going forward? Will drivers retain the previous rankings and update in September once the W season starts? And so this is alluding to the timing of driver ratings, usually being what, Graham, late November, December-ish thing?
Effectively it's a calendar year system at the moment.
In the middle of the WC Super Season.
Correct. So basically there'll be the first cut comes in November, final amendments come in December. They're then applicable from January onwards. So in other words, you apply for your driver ranking, that applies for, in this case, calendar year 2019. My understanding is that the regulations for the WEC will continue to say that a driver who starts the season, and you're absolutely right, MP, that means that you'd start the season in September, that they will retain that driver ranking for the purposes of that championship only through to the end of the season, which with a winter season would be at the Le Mans 24 Hours in June the following year. It is exactly the way in which it is done, for instance, with the Asian Le Mans series, where you retain a silver ranking, for instance, until the end of the season. I've got a funny feeling that happened with Thomas Laurent last year. I think there were a couple of guys that were upgraded effectively midway through the season. But for my money, that's the right way to do it. You can't be recasting a program and a championship midway through. And that's just one of those wrinkles that had to be worked out with the shift for the WEC from a regular calendar year season to the winter season we progress with once we get beyond Le Mans next year.
I was concerned when you said you had a funny feeling because the last time you said that, you'd sat on your stapler. So,
indeed. Yeah, still can't get it out of there.
I think, take a look through, I think we might be done with ACO WC World. Did we miss any good ones?
We got some bits and pieces there, but let's see if we get some chance to come back to some of the other bits and bobs here. But lots to do with EOT, lots to do with the speed of the cars. I think that's going to be a much more interesting question when we get to the Shanghai race. But, we now move into physically, if not in pure points terms, the second half of the WEC season, and maybe we're about to see a big change.
Well, why don't we dive into IMSA, knowing that we have about 50 minutes left. Not an MP 50 minutes, but an actual 50 minutes
Actual
left.
50.
A clock-based 50 minutes left, and knowing that IMSA World takes up the majority of our goodies, why don't we start here? And our friend Kevin Perez Federico says, hey guys, with next year's DPI cars untethered, will the Mazda go for bigger displacement motor to compensate for the current package's shortcomings, or bring back Skyactiv TDI? Says, figure with a Yost's extensive experience with racing TDI, they could do better with Skyactiv than the previous program solution providers. Kev, yeah, I would say not a crazy idea. I have spoken with Mazda. They have confirmed that for next year there will be 0 changes in both displacement to their 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, nor will there be a change in what fuels and combusts and makes it go forward. So it will be a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo using petrol/gas lean, not diesel. So I think, Graham, based on what we saw at Petit Le Mans, with the cars finishing fighting second and third, they were on the right fuel strategy plan, came up just a little bit shy there. I have a feeling that it won't be too long until Mazda gets its first win once we climb into that 2019 season. So
I hope so. I think for me, from afar, for somebody who's not covering IMSA racing for a full season, looking in from afar, for me, that program right there is what DPI should be. That is something that looks fundamentally different from its LMP2 car base. And they're going with something that actually means something directly to the road-going product. I wish them well. It was great to see them running hard and running for the full race at Petit Le Mans. Fell a little short, but they had one of their better days, didn't they?
Absolutely. Let's see. I'm just going to go down the list here for a little bit, for my friend. Jordan Hopwoods says, why aren't customers allowed to race Lexus and GTD? How are Lexus getting away with only allowing AIM to run Lexus and GTD? Lexus are really treating GTD if it's GTE cars that are racing instead of GT3. And then Chris Alpha B, and I'm sorry, you need to coach me on your last name there, brother. My limitation, not yours. With 3 GT and Lexus splitting, what's the future for the RCF GT3 and the 3GT squad? Jordan, I can't say if Lexus is outright refusing to sell its cars. I just don't know in North America for IMSA, or maybe even over in the Blanc. I'm just going to call it World Challenge, by the way, Graham. I forgot to tell you, over the weekend I decided whatever the ridiculous new name that they've come up with for the Pirelli World Challenge series, since Pirelli's been dropped now, and it's now SRO Blancpain owned and blah, blah, blah. It's just going to be World Challenge. For me, obviously, you're welcome to call it whatever you want, but it's just World Challenge. I can't say, Jordan. Unfortunately, despite my requests, they do not keep me in the loop on all of their business dealings. But I know that rule-wise and spirit-wise, I know IMSA would be very unhappy to learn that there was an active effort to not allow others to gain access to their RCF GT3s. So it might just be a case of Is anybody actually calling up wanting to buy them and use them? Knowing that we have Audis, knowing that we have Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Porsches, there's BMW there as well. There's lots and lots of cars that do lots of winning. Not in the obviously the Lexus have broken through into that category as well. But yeah, who knows? I guess is maybe the best answer I can come up with. The 3GT angle, they were a part of that program from the outset. They have had success this year. I think they've become a very strong entity with them. I also would say that there's still probably a question, though, knowing that it started out as a pure factory, 100% funded by Lexus in 2017, transitioned to a Pro-Am thing this year, where, I think we could be honest in saying we know that money still traded hands, but by no means full budget by any stretch. I think there's a real question as to how good will the Lexus RCF GT3 platform be in the hands of a completely different team. And so if the AIM Autosport / Vassar Sullivan folks show up, Graham, and continue to win, I think we're going to see more folks probably ringing up Lexus saying, hey, how do I get one? Because we've seen that outside of the full factory thing that brought it into the series, this thing is now winning in the hands of a completely different team. There's still going to be that semi-works affiliation there, technical support, just as all the other manufacturers offer or provide their teams in GTD. On the commercial side, even on the driver's side, I think that's going to be an interesting one. The Vassar Sullivan folks have no real in-depth knowledge on the driver's side. AIM, obviously, have quite a bit. So who they come up with, who they accept, who has the right budget to offer, we'll find out. I'm not sure if it's going to look all that familiar to this year's lineup, though, if anything like it. So, but yeah, I don't think that anyone's intentionally trying to prevent sales. I just don't. If I was a team looking for a car, I can tell you right now, I would not be calling them. And it's not because I don't believe they have a great car. It's because I haven't seen it succeed outside of that full factory-ish type environment. As for what 3GT has coming, they claim that they have something on the way in terms of news that'll tell us what they're doing through 2019 and 2020. And whatever that is, I will look forward to finding out. I don't have a clue. I'd also be lying if I said it was something that I'm just truly trying to chase to find out. So, again, maybe that's my own limitation there. Do you want to take the next one from Stathis, or where should we go next in IMSA land?
Let's have a quick from our good friend, as I span down this one. Good grief, Stathis Karagiannis, he's really disappointed, he says, with IMSA. The incident 31 that sent the car into the wall by causing a collision. Incident investigated, decision was no further action. Outrageous, because they wanted to protect the points leader, says Status. Similar, if not identical, accident last year. Car was penalised with a 7-minute stop-go. This is the 4-wide incident, wasn't it, with the 2 Action Express cars,
yeah.
MP, which put the Turner Motorsport car into the wall very heavily indeed. I saw it briefly with a highlights package I was watching in Fuji. It looked clumsy rather than deliberate. I think basically someone just got spooked. A little bit too much movement on the wheel coming into turn 1, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it's very messy indeed from the BMW's driver and, for that matter, team's point of view, and their race over early as a result. I have to say I would have been surprised if I'd have been there and that was no further action. What do you say?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised there was no action taken. And do I think that this was the world's greatest offense? No. I think going 4-wide, which the Fox Sports commentary team was like, I don't know if we've ever seen 4-wide on the front straight at Petit Le Mans, especially that early in the race. I agree with them. I think that was getting to be a little bit silly. Did the 31 Action Express car overreact and cause unnecessary damage that ended up I'm sure I haven't, called to see what the bill is, but that clearly did frame damage to the Turner Motorsport BMW M6 GT3. That's going to be a big bill. To me, maybe others don't agree with this. I've said many times that I'm not a huge penalty guy, but I think when you do something that is completely unnecessary, that ends up costing someone else not just a race or their chance at success, but big financial implications as well. For me, at least, that's got to factor in. Hey, you didn't just take it out of the race. You just half ruined his car as well for no reason. If the two of them, granted, we're talking different classes, prototypes and GTDs, but if they were somehow in a position where they were fighting over a patch of tarmac and whomever won was going to get some sort of big advantage in the overall scheme, and one hit the other and there was a similar big crash, okay, racing incident. This, to me, got spooked, overreacted, and an accordion effect where if we're thinking of the four cars in front of us and the second car moves over, hits the third car enough to make the third car then bounce into the fourth car, and the fourth car goes flying off the track, slams into the barriers and such. I thought there should have been some sort of penalty. A drive through a plus 5 or 10, I don't know what it is, something. And I also thought the timing, and this is all where it's personal opinion. Bo Barfield does this for a living, and I think does it well. But I think at that earliest stage in the race, Graham, it warranted some sort of statement that, hey, we're not letting you get this crazy this early field. We're sending a clear notice not only that the 31's being penalized, but I'm sending an instant message to every team owner saying, did you see that? Tell your men and women out there, we're not having this for the other 9 hours to go. So I thought that was a little bit crazy and out of hand.
Tend to agree. Stas has got another question about TV. We'll hang on to that for the general section because it meets in pretty well with it. Couple of questions, MP, though, about what's coming in terms of announcements for the NBC TV deal. Obviously, it was the final race for the current and long-standing team looking after IMSA. A fair amount of emotion attached to that. Have you got any intelligence at all about what's coming?
Yeah, and I have to underreport here. I know that those who are not affiliated with either company have no need, nor should they underreport. Having been a part of the Fox family for a really long time, and I mean, even as of last year, I was on air with them. And then also on the NBCSN side, I don't even think they know, the senior ups wouldn't even know I exist, nor should they, because they have bigger things to worry about. But as someone who participates and is a color analyst on about half, if not more, of the Indy Lights races each year on NBCSN, there's a reason for me to not really delve into, hey, this is what I know is happening. I do know, and I can share this without betraying confidences, because I was part of a big email chain from within the Fox Sports family, that there are a lot of folks who took part in broadcasting the Petit Le Mans finale Saturday night on pit lane, in the booth, wherever else, who in some way, shape, or form, even possibly on TV, were saying farewell, thinking that might have been their final chance to say thank you and goodbye during an endurance racing broadcast. So I'll just leave that there, which obviously implies that I think there's going to be fairly significant changes compared to, hey, you all have been doing a great job for 20 plus years. We're going to import 90% of you to just continue what you're doing. I would have loved to have seen that. I haven't heard that is going to happen. But that's just, I have no official anything being mentioned about that. I just have not heard that that's going to happen. And also having seen a lot of folks thinking that they're going to be done with Petit Le Mans broadcast, that at least makes me think we might have a little bit of a roadmap of what to expect whenever it is announced.
It's one of the three people have asked a broadly similar question. I'm keen to hear what you've got to say about this, MP. Ryan Terpstra, Edurus, Donald, Goran. It's all about the Maya Shank announcement. The debut of the Caterpillar-backed all-female driver lineup, Acura NSX GT3 for next season. As to Donald is asking whether or not this is going to be a second or a third car, future for the current 86 and 93 cars. Ed asking around, specifically around the all female aspect of that one. Ryan too, saying he knows it's newsworthy because it's an all-female driver lineup, but he also comments that the Acura lineup with that car looks rock solid. What expectations do you have? I'll admit right here and now, obviously we know of Catherine Legg and we know a little bit about the other drivers, but I will not pretend that I'm aware of the kind of potential form we're going to see from that car.
So timing-wise, I'm due to do a standalone podcast with Jackie Heinricher, who is the main principal behind this. She and Kat will be teaming full-time next year in that entry. Jackie has also brought on CAT, C-A-T, the heavy equipment manufacturer, as a sponsor for this. Not sure when that's going to go up, whether it's before or after our beloved Week in Sports Cars podcast here. So I'm hoping to tell you more about that program in general and about Jackie and just who she is. On the specific questions about potential and whatnot, I don't believe that this specific entry at the standard events, the non-endurance events, where they won't have Anna Beatriz and Simona Di Silvestro in position, I would struggle to say it's going to continue at the same level of competitiveness, and that's because Jackie is at the early-ish stage of her career. She's come into racing a bit later in life and has participated in IMSA in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo category, done some races there, but would say that she is certainly would fall into the AM side of a Pro-Am model and not a sneaky fake silver or anything like that, but a true starting out AM. So with that said, you would not expect the car to be in the same vying for a championship in its first season as they were this year with Kat on board and her variety of teammates. So I think it might be a little bit of a step back from a competitiveness standpoint, but hey, you got to start somewhere. And I'm more happy that Jackie's come in, made this happen, made a commitment to Honda Performance Development and Michael Shank and Jim Meyer, and decided that, hey, we're doing this. As for the rest of the program, who's going to be in what and when, and possibly a second car, that is my ignorance. I do indeed need to catch up with Mike and hopefully learn a little bit more about thoughts and plans there. I know that one of the big rumors going around last weekend at Petit Le Mans, because a lot of people text or call and say, hey, what have you heard, was that with longtime Michael Shank Racing pal AJ Allmendinger being announced that he is going to be out of his longtime NASCAR ride at the end of the year. There have been questions, hey, is he going to go to IndyCar with the MSR team, knowing that they have an entry there? Or is it going to be IMSA? I can only tell you that Mike ruled out IndyCar. And it wasn't because I asked about both, and that's the only one he commented on. I wasn't smart enough to ask about the IMSA side, whether we might have Dinger there. So I can at least say that AJ won't be a part of, open wheel stuff with Meyer Shank Racing, but don't know if there could be other fun stuff. So probably more of a Pruett, do your work and get answers to these questions type thing than me actually having anything of super value to offer.
Well, that neatly answers the question asked by Anthony Mahoney about Dinger. But there's also another question that kind of came out of that one. Comes from Backstreet. It's in our general section. And he reminds me of something I have to tell you I'd forgotten about, which again referencing that MSR, the cat-backed all-female effort, reminds us that the ACO was supposed to announce a WC initiative to encourage participation of female drivers at this year's Le Mans press conference. I think that was a WC and FIA thing, but I have absolutely no idea what's actually happened with that one, and I will toddle off once we're actually dealing with daylight as being a real-life option, and we'll ask the direct question, because you're absolutely right. They did indeed suggest that there would be an initiative going forward, and about that I have heard nothing. So we'll follow that one up for you, Baxter.
Brilliant. Let's see. What am I going to grab next? Well, you're not in front of me, so I can't grab you. Let's see. Jordan Darwin. Boy, I've had a lot of conversations with folks about this topic just in the past 48 hours. GG and MP. How would you judge the Acura Team Penske program's first year? It was nice to see them leading, but did they really have much of a chance at Petit? So, I have a lot of friends there, so granted, they all have fairly good taste, so they don't listen to this podcast, but I don't want to say too many things to get too many nasty stares, but it would be hard for me, Jordan, to look back at 2018 and say without qualification that they met or exceeded expectations. You could say, hey, it's first year, they're just back, they're learning DPI, this is new stuff. Hey, it's a whole different thing. Yeah, true. I was surprised that the team was not punching above its weight on a more regular basis. And we know, everyone should know, that the Eureka 07 chassis it's built on has proven itself to be the fastest stock P2. So among all of the DPIs, which are all built off of stock P2s, we know that chassis has the potential to be the fastest, demonstrated that clearly. We know that the Acura/Honda twin-turbo V6 is as proven a power plant in endurance racing as you could ask. So in theory, the marriage of those two, Graham, should have just been dynamic. What could limit that dynamicism? Well, balance of performance, obviously. Through the twists of the proverbial BOP knobs, that Acura Air X05 could go super quick, super slow, somewhere in between whatever IMSA chose. I know that in getting very high-quality feedback from those who would know, there were certainly far too many times this year where it felt like the new Acura Team Penske entries were being overly BOP'd, possibly out of fear that, hey, we don't want the big Death Star team to come in, knock off all the existing teams in their first year, and realize everyone's worst fears. That's not critical of IMSA. I would probably have the same thought. Hey, we want to make sure that even though we know this is the most heavily resourced team in seemingly any paddock that they participate in, we want to make sure that they don't just roll up, knock everybody off, and run away with every championship possible. Got that part. I do feel, though, like, Graham, we might have had a little bit too heavy of a BOP influence at some rounds, just watching. I know that talking to some highly qualified folks who could definitely provide quality answers, that where the Acuras could match or run similar peak lap times, maybe a qualifying or for short bursts during a stint in a race, doing that consistently for a full stint or even multiple stints at the longer races, that's where there seem to be some limitations. Definitely there's a feeling, not at every round, but at too many rounds, that, boy, I'm not in those other cars, but following them, they pick whichever one's probably a Cadillac, maybe a Mazda, maybe a Nissan. Boy, at whatever track, they sure seem to be going through the corners fairly smoothly, and I'm having to drive at 174% and keep this thing from spinning and crashing at all times just to stay in their draft. So I think if we were to look at BOP for next year, Jordan, I think things might be a little less harsh on that front. But I would also say that there were some dumb crashes, dumb mistakes. Our pal Juan Montoya What was that? What was that at Petit Le Mans? I mean, that was just an error. I mean, I get it. Just not something you expect from Montoya. I would say that the team as well did not look like it necessarily executed at the highest level at all times. So, yeah, you could throw in some new Team Blues, even though it's Team Penske. You could probably say the team might have underestimated BOP. They have not really had to work in that construct before, at least in any modern version of the team. So, if there's one thing in this, let me try and find the question here, that I hope I'm getting the right one. Well, I'll save this till I can find it. Actually, this one comes in from our friend Shay Adam. She's submitting a non-frivolous question for once. She says, since we've just had a spectacular ending to the 2018 season, who are your MVP drivers in prototype, GTLM, and GTD? You may only pick one. No duos allowed. I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb here, knowing that Action Express won the championship, and actually pick Ricky Taylor as part of that Acura Team Penske program. That entry was not blessed with all the great finishes that they had hoped for. But I'll tell you, watching Ricky at numerous rounds this year, it looked to me from the outside that he was the one rock-solid bullet wherever they went. And also, just general feeling is that within this team, in his first year, Graham, it really looks like they fell in love with the kid. So
I completely agree, and you know what? I'd have given exactly the same answer. The other answer I possibly would have given, and I'm genuinely not sure which one I'd have gone for, is either Colin Brown or indeed John Bennett, because of the way they executed a marginally different rule book and kept that fight open right to the end. So, but no, in terms of the pure blinding, factory back speed, I think you're absolutely right. I think Ricky it is.
How about the other two classes, GTLM and GTD?
Well, here's the weird one. I'm going to go for a driver that didn't win this year, and then he did, and that's Antonio Garcia. Because it's just, there is something about the way that he drives, the kind of the aggression that he gives it year after year. He doesn't seem to age any, which is something rather odd about the Corvette squad. It does seem to be kind of Narnia-like, doesn't it? Nobody ages there particularly. But Antonio Garcia, there is something about him. He's the kind of the baby-faced assassin. You would never, if you didn't know he was a world-class race driver, you would never pick him out of a lineup and say, that's the guy. He hasn't got that kind of killer look. But boy, oh boy, you put him in a GT car and he's the last person in the world you want to see in your rearview mirror.
I also love the fact that he reminded us he was human at Petit by stuffing the dang thing into the wall
absolutely.
And creating drama. It's the most non-Garcia-like thing, but I actually found that to be kind of awesome. Like, oh my goodness, Superman's cape falls off every now and then. He spills coffee on his lap or whatever. He's human. Oh my goodness. So, yeah. What about GTD? Boy, that this one, I'll offer one here, and maybe this is like okay, Pruett, are you sure? I don't know. I mean, there's so many amazing drivers. I'll throw out one who isn't my pick, but I think deserves definite recognition. Andy Lally put in more, oh my God, I'm not going to forget that stint drives than any other driver that comes to mind for the year. I would say Catherine Legg as well. 2 wins, 5 podiums leading into or maybe even 6 podiums leading into the final race. She was a machine. I do not believe she has driven at a higher level ever, including open wheel. And I was so happy to see her in a position where she could vie for a championship. The one I'm going to choose, though, it's his first championship. It also involved having to be a mentor and coach on top of a flawless driver, and also someone who seemingly got fairly comfortable having to go to little NASCAR eighth mile roundy round tracks to try and bed in a new engine or whatever for whichever failures and such. And that's Brian Sellers with the championship winning Paul Miller Racing Team. I just think this was the culmination of all of his skills behind the wheel as a teammate, as a coach, as a team leader, just every ingredient that would go into a championship. I think he was just absolutely incredible this year. So, and also as one of the nicest, most encouraging people in the paddock as well. If you aren't happy about Brian Sellers winning his first major championship, then say hello to the rest of your compatriots in Al-Qaeda.
I'm not going to disagree with Brian Sellers. Ultimately, best drivers, isn't it great when they can actually come away and win a championship? And your endorsement of Brian and all his varied on and off track qualities is spot on. I'd add in others, including Jack Hawksworth. Well, I know we've chatted about Jack on previous shows and the blinding speed he showed in the Lexus. But no, Brian Sellers, I'd be entirely happy to kind of put a great big line underneath that name.
Well, let's see other great big lines. Did we mention last week that former drug smuggler Bill Whittington's going back to prison, former IMSA driver? Speaking of big white lines or lines of a variety of colors? Maybe not. Okay, let's see. Sorry, couldn't resist. That was bad, though. I shouldn't say such things. Let's see. Right Turn Lover says, loved the IMSA race. Would have loved it even more if Core would have taken the title. Where will we find our Goliath-slaying Davids next year? And I believe we also had another question. And again, I'm just trying to scroll. John Sable, our pal, says, not a question but a comment. Mad props to John Bennett for giving up his pursuit of the Jim Truman Award in lieu of his team going for the Prototype Championship. He says, I'm aware this is a, quote, first world problem, but it was nice to see in at times a big ego sport. Yeah, well, hey, John, 100%. I thought that was amazing, too. I get we want to win both. We want to get our auto invite to Le Mans and be Prototype champions. But, yeah, I think they could have easily done the first, but it certainly would have torpedoed the latter. We also saw, John, a little bit of the value systems at play. What are we going to remember? What would folks tend to remember in years ahead? Probably be that Core Autosport knocked off every single DPI factory to win IMSA's Prototype Championship. Not that he won the Jim Truman Award and got an auto invite to Le Mans. Ultimately, they chose to go after the big prize. Didn't pan out. But hey, it was still, for me, the best part of the year. And back to Right Turn Lover. Yeah, I will tell you, I'm struggling a little bit to see how we have that same thing going next year, knowing that we're splitting DPI from LMP2. Could it be Mazda? Maybe. When will they break through and get that victory? And could it be more than just a token, hey, they got to win, but more of a, could they be the type of entrant to beat up folks and get lots of seconds and thirds and be in contention for a title? I would not think that would be out of the asking.
Well, I wonder, MP, whether or not we've got a couple of newcomers to DPI, strong equipment. We know there's some good drivers involved with at least one of those teams where we know where the drivers are coming from. That could be where the shocker comes.
Absolutely. So I think that there's potential there, but maybe not the automatic, holy cow, these privateers are whooping up on the old factories. I think we were blessed with that. If we had it every year, it'd probably feel a little bit less special. Let's see, where else should we go here?
Well, are we about the point where it's a good time to have a look at some of these general questions, MP? Because there's a nice diversity of stuff there. I mean, I should say, by the way, from afar, wish I'd been there. Couldn't be in both places at once. What a finale IMSA doled out for the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship this year, and in particular those closing laps. Absolutely spellbinding stuff. Good luck, bad luck, you name it. It was all there. It's exactly what the end of the season should be. Not finding out exactly what was going to happen until the very last corner. Fantastic.
Well, let's grab one more IMSA question. We'll jump over to general, and if we have time, we'll try and pick up a few more IMSA to close. But I love Daniel Macbeth's note here, and I guess this is just more fortuitous timing. Not a question, but a quick comment on Petit Le Mans. As I drove the half hour from my home to the race, I listened to last week's The Week in Sports Cars. The topic, as I parked my car, was Kevin Magnussen and his chances of driving with his father. Forward half an hour to the grid walk, and who do I bump into? Kevin Magnussen! I chuckled to myself and wanted someone to share the moment with. So, hey, look at that.
There's a tip, Daniel. Next time, share the moment with Kevin, because I genuinely think he'd have appreciated it. And I think this is the thing. One of the things that swapping over from being a fan, and I'm still a fan, to a journalist has been is that spectacular revelation that these guys do love to talk about what they're passionate about. So if you get that moment, think of just how you're going to make that approach. And just ask that question or make that point. I think you will surprise yourself with the response you get from the majority of the guys that race and girls that race in our fair sports. They love what they do. They love to talk about what they do. They're, believe me, way more opinionated than most of you guys are. And I think, you know what? They're the moments that make going to the races special. Having that paddock, that ability to access the paddock in IMSA, the ability to interact with the teams and particularly the drivers, I think is a spectacular thing. It'd be great to hear some of your stories from interaction with some of those fair folks, because I bet there's a myriad of them.
Bit of a breaking exclusive scoop here. I just lied. We're not going to leave IMSA. I just found two more I liked, so we're not going away.
Go for it.
Back. We're going to skip here for a sec. Joe Izzo says, IMSA DPI question. If I win my billions in the Power Lotto, can I just buy a P2 car and run 2 pro drivers, or would I need to hook up with a manufacturer in order to get to play with the big boys? You would, Joe, need to, per IMSA's rules, link up with some sort of manufacturer. You could follow the now just ESM model, and that is spend your own money, go hire your own manufacturer, get their engine, work with them to do some styling, but essentially fund it out of your own pocket to make a DPI and have that association. But who knows, if you did win billions, then, maybe you could actually entice a manufacturer to come in and do it, and you'd still be paying for it, but maybe they would just handle the whole thing for you. So yeah, the way things are written, you'd have to. I'd say the other question that stands out, we don't know to what level or degree IMSA is going to go to in separating DPI from LMP2 on the stopwatch next year. So is it just restoring some of the power and downforce and torque that's been taken away, and possibly fuel capacity that's been taken away from DPI? So just giving back some to allow them to be faster. Would it be actually taking some away from the P2s? Not sure what that is going to look like. I expect there to be some sort of difference, but I guess what I'm getting at is we'll have to wait and see, but could there be a situation where if someone had a spec LMP2 car, packed it full of serious pros, could they bother a DPI? I would hope that if someone wanted to do that, that they could, and that the balance of performance regulations would not be something where it was truly impossible. We love upsets, but we'll have to see if IMSA is thinking the same thing. Let's go last one here for now. I promise, no more lies after this. Alex Eichmiller, thank you, Alex, for always sending in great questions. Says there's a lot of excitement last year when it was announced that Yost would be running the Mazda DPI program. While they've been fast, they've made many mistakes and failed in execution. Is this just down to a new team coming together, us having too high of expectations, or something else?
It's Ralph Yutner. Ralph Yutner is just terrible.
Yes, we got terrible to that guy. I think you answered the question with all the potential scenarios there, Alex. Yeah, we've said this a few times before, but I think it's worth restating. boy, just like we mentioned with Acura Team Penske, the Team Penske side maybe not living up to expectations because they're Penske, because the expectations are so high, Graham. Anything other than a solid butt-whooping from start to finish almost feels like, boy, what happened to those guys? So they're a little bit of a victim of their own success, where we just expect it at all times. If it isn't there, oh boy, they're really, really doing a poor job. Not necessarily the case. I would say the same thing here, definitely with Team Yost. We know what they've been able to do with unlimited budgets. We expect them to be able to come in and really put a big amount of shine on Mazda's program. The cars are certainly faster. I'd say that's the one thing that it wasn't all Yost by any means. I know Multimatic was a huge part of that, but the general effort that Yost was involved in to help improve the pace of the RT24Ps, that paid off. That worked. We also, Graham, saw unrivaled, unseen levels of reliability with Mazda prototypes. We've never seen the cars run as long, as consistently, without something, internally breaking, failing, falling off, or otherwise. They really took huge strides there. Where we saw some other things that were flat out embarrassing were things like wheels falling off, though. External things coming off. At least as it sticks in my head, I seem to think I recall more Mazdas losing wheels this year than any other entrant. Can't really pin that on the choice of chassis supplier, who makes the engine, who's driving the thing. If folks routinely fail to hit the gun hard enough to make sure that wheel stays on, front wheel, rear wheel, you got to look at the people who are looking after the program. I would say there's also a bit of an acclimatization needed too, Graham, in that although Yost was a big part of the ALMS and Audi's program more than a decade ago, you still have to learn the vagaries of how modern-day IMSA does things, what they do during yellows, how the pit lane execution is done, what's open and closed, when aren't you allowed to do this, just overall strategy. I would expect, Alex, for them to come back next year and look truly polished. I did expect to see more polish this year. Did not see as much as I thought we would have. If it needs to be there next year. If it isn't, I would say it's going to be more of a condemnation of Team Yost than Mazda, because we know how good Yost can be. We didn't see all of that goodness this year, but we definitely should next. And with that, Mr. Goodwin, take us into General World.
Let's pick up a couple of the quick ones here. It was a good one for both of us, actually. Not exactly racing related. You guys travel so much. What are your travel tips, do's or don'ts? I've got one, and one only. That is, get yourself a very good pair of noise-cancelling headphones. That's it. That's my biggest travel tip of the lot. That has made such a big difference to me. Oh, by the way, the second one, which is, if at all possible, never check a bag. I've saved days with just taking a bag off the plane, waltzing off to the shuttle bus or the car park, and that does me fine. Anything from you, MP?
Well, yeah, I guess I could throw plenty in here. First of all, though, some of you might know I am a huge fan of Southwest Airlines. There are no baggage fees, so that's a great thing. Couple of things for me that I really work on. First of all, you mentioned one, and whether it's noise-canceling headphones or just high-quality headphones, something in the form of an iPad, your phone, something that you can put on your head to hear sounds, the use of a tablet, something along those lines where I can watch a movie, watch TV shows, something to help the time from gate to gate go by. That helps immensely. It's really, honestly, it has transformed my approach and thought process to travel. Whenever I got my first iPad 7, 8, 9 years ago, I went from dreading travel to, all right, that's not so bad. I can go off in my own world. The other thing I would say, which might be a little bit different than your approach, is, sometimes we will record when you're sitting in the whichever lounge at Heathrow, and you'll tell me, my flight's in 4 hours. And Good on you. We could never do this with me recording in a lounge at an airport because I am never there that early. If we were doing a 5-minute podcast, we could do it. Other than that, I really do try and... The biggest approach I have, and the thing I try and do, my own little hack towards travel as I get older and try and be more protective of my time, is if my flight is at 11 a.m., I then immediately start thinking backwards to, okay, boarding is at 10:30, starts at 10:30, so I need to be in line at 10:30. Let me count back to how long it's going to take to get to the curb at this particular airport, drag bags in, whatever, check them in, get upstairs, get through TSA. At least leaving for flights, I've gotten it down to often standing no more than 3 or 4 minutes before the boarding process begins. And so it's how do I spend less time standing around in an airport feeling like my life is going nowhere, and how can I cut that out and just get it down to the travel?
You're right, and actually that is a difference for me. I've cut through that awfulness. I loathe the dirge of airport process, the security process. I know how essential it is, etc., etc. But I deal with it in entirely the opposite way. I actually get there as early as possible, principally
so you can get drunk.
No, I don't drink before I get on a flight ever.
On the flight, though. Woo.
On the flight, absolutely hammered. But for me, because the traffic around the two major London airports is so bad, I do give myself literally hours. And I'm lucky because I do so much international travel that I do get access to some very nice lounges, which means I've got a working environment I can play with. And I do. And a fair amount of the writing that I actually do in the days around a race meeting is done sitting with a decent cup of coffee in my hand, or at least on the desk next to me, tapping away at an airport lounge. So if you get that opportunity, I know very many people don't. It used to feel to me when I didn't get that as just a kind of frippery. For me now, it's absolutely an essential part of it. It just gives you that peace and quiet away from the hassle that is an international airport. So that's my tip. Travel more. Get more from it.
One more in there, and it's on the time protection. It might not be protection, but more time value angle. I used to do, I think back to like the 2013 IndyCar season where every flight, it seems like I was leaving the hotel to come home at like 4:30 to get to the airport for some sort of 6 a.m. flight. All because in my mind, I'm like, well, but that'll get me home sooner. I'll have more time home. And I also would realize that having gotten up at 3:30 to catch a shower and blah, 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 and then get out the door in time, I'd get home early, but I'd be a zombie for the rest of the day and completely useless. And so I've shifted my approach there a little bit as well to, yeah, there are some inverse red eyes. Well, I guess you're still red-eyed when you're leaving out that early in the morning, but will I get home and either have the mind left to work if I have some work to do, or will my wife actually have come to an agreement that it's good that I'm home, or all right, great, he showed up, threw his bags down, and fell face first on the bed and is snoring right now. So I've just tried to take a little bit of a smarter approach there, saying, okay, so what if I catch the 10 a.m. flight? I get home a little bit later, but I get a little bit more sleep, and I'm a more productive member of the family or society. And that even comes down to, Graham, another trick that I've done over the last couple of years, which is if I'm at a Road America and it's an hour-ish plus to the airport, instead of staying over Sunday night at that hotel near the track and then getting up crack of dawn and driving down, the thing I've been doing of late is checking out when I leave the hotel Sunday morning, head to the track, do whatever reporting, then drive down to Milwaukee, for example, get a hotel that's right next to the airport that's not too expensive. And so I've saved myself an hour of sleep and also wake up right there. So there's really not that much to do. Just basically wake up, stumble into the car, drop it off, and off you go. So I would say most of my little suggestions would be, if you value your time, find the ways to shorten up the exit, the return, and in between.
Here's moving away from that one. Here's one it's been kicking around our question list for quite some little time, and I'm going to pick it out now. It's from Tim Same. The question is asked already, and he's one of several people that responded to a call I made this week, and thank you guys for responding positively to ask some of these questions a little more concisely. If you were given the task of making a sports car theme park attraction, what type of attraction would you create? What would you name it? I've got one.
Please.
I think the world needs an Alan McNish themed ride, and I've even got the name for it. Although we may get in some trouble with Disney for this. What about It's a Small World? or another one that occurs, and it's even EOT based. You could go on a roller lift and coaster.
See, I think you're onto something there. This might, I don't know. Do we have another couple more to go with, or do you think this should be our closer? Because I've got at least one to throw in. I'm not sure, though.
Oh, well, we've got, I think there's another couple that we probably should get to.
Okay.
The other thing I should say about theme parks, it's important to say, do have a distinct familiarity with LMP1. I can say this as the father of a teenage daughter who does like to spend her birthdays at theme parks, and it does seem to me that the budget just goes up on a vertical curve every single year.
There we go. Well, I would say mine would be, I guess it would be theme parkish. It maybe borrows a little bit more from some of the like the Las Vegas crime tour, where you climb in the open top bus and you drive around, and here is where gangster such and such did this. And there are a few of those type of tours around the country where you can go and see where gangsters did evil things and whatnot. I would think we could have some sort of theme park built around that with, the level 5 area, the Farnbacher Lowell, and here's, just create an actual dedicated theme park to where now look at how the money is being laundered by the sale of marijuana. That is, just there's so much there to be had. Going back, hey, and here, come in, join the Vic Lee nitrogen tank welding class, where you too can figure out how to stuff bags of cocaine into the race team's equipment. You just, hey, have some fun. So I don't know. I'd love to go. I might be the only person, but that would be some fun storytelling. Bad?
It's a thought. Well, there's every chance that, with one of these kind of naming rights at a circuit of your choice, that kind of attraction might form a part of it. Let's have a quick look what else we can go for.
I love the throwaway line. Oh, it's a thought, which is a kind way of saying, that's a thought.
Oh, yeah. No, you're mad.
Consider it. It definitely does qualify as a thought.
We've got a couple of quick questions from Eamon Barnett, Richard Parsons. There's another one somewhere I can't find immediately, which asks about the Aston Martin DTM project. Eamon asking, how did Aston Martin decide to enter DTM? Richard saying, with Aston Martin joining DTM ranks, do you think this could be used to get MR back in the swing of a more prototype style of racing, ready for the car regs when they come? The answer is in the negative for both. Actually, the DTM project has nothing to do with Aston Martin, other than the fact that they've given a license to R Motorsport, AF Racing, Swiss entity that races in Blancpain endurance with customer GT3 cars, to use the silhouette of the Aston Martin Vantage. So it is not an Aston Martin Works program or anything remotely like it. None of their money going into it. This is a customer program, and it's all to do with basically getting to the required minimum of 3 manufacturers. A lot of the running here has been made by Gerhard Berger and the promoters of the DTM in trying to find a way into this. It also, by the way, saves the DTM knowledge of HWA, very much part of the Mercedes-Benz family, and of course Mercedes-Benz exiting the DTM. So it's all around make to amend. Whether or not that has a knock-on effect to what you may see in terms of customer programs in the LMP1 hypercar era remains to be seen. Certainly our motorsport have made it clear that they've got ambitions in that direction. We'll just have to wait and see if that actually emerges, but not an Aston Martin factory effort. That said, if plans come together, there might be 2 to 4 of those cars on the DTM grids in the next couple of years.
I've got one here. Daniel Tripp, thank you for cutting 475,000 words from the original version, your Can-Am distilled version, your Can-Am manifesto. Daniel suggests the world needs a spec chassis for the first 2 years, similar in concept to LMP2, except open cockpit, minimum engine displacement of 5.2 liters, brilliant, sprint race format with standing starts and restarts, things that are non-negotiable, no BS, no traction control, no hybrid witchcraft, no rolling starts, no in-race refueling. Last but not least, absolutely, positively, no, hashtag the 3 letters that shall not be spoken. Feel free to cherry pick anything from the manifesto that you find good, bad, or downright insane. Can I mention, Graham, by the way, it has taken Daniel's note here for me to realize we started off this podcast the week after the Rolex 24 at Daytona, beginning of February, and immediately set ourselves a hard cap of 3 uses of balance of performance per episode.
We did.
I don't know if we've used it 3 times in the last 3 episodes. So
no, it's interesting, isn't it?
Something good. There's some good mojo happening here. BOP is not becoming as much of a thing. I mean, I know I spoke about it in relation to Penske and they're being a little bit maybe unsure as to why they couldn't just beat everybody in a BOP construct. But yeah, I like where we're going here, friends. We encourage fewer opportunities to get depressed about BOP. Daniel, first of all, I love you. I hope that doesn't embarrass you, but I'm madly in love with you. Yes, look, minimum, that's what we need. We need more racing series where they say there's a minimum of something. Minimum 5.2 liters. That's brilliant. Minimum of X horsepower. Minimum top speed. Everything you're spelling out here is truly just a modern version of the Can-Am series. Big, obnoxious, and goes really fast. I qualify as 2 of those first 3 items, by the way. I don't know who would be in for this, because it does seem to spit in the face a little bit of where most automotive companies are going with what they want to play in racing, Graham, right? We either want something that is high-tech or hypercar-ish, but just rudimentary, scare the children, which is a great thing. It doesn't seem to be something most people embrace. I'll just throw this out too, Graham, that about 5 years ago about 5 years ago maybe, there was someone trying to propose a modern Can-Am series that did all of these things, and it went nowhere. The guy doing it, I don't remember his name, completely obnoxious. So there have been folks who share your same desire, Daniel. I do as well. How's this? Maybe we need to find someone who can build these cars and have them readily available so that folks could buy them for track days. And then if there were enough built, some enterprising person could say, oh, and you know what? Now that there are 20-ish of them in existence, maybe we should form a series.
Well, I mean, it strikes me it's the kind of concept that would do well in a market that is fairly kind of closed. South Africa maybe, Australia maybe, Japan maybe, if Class 1 failed further down the line. Whether or not you'd get it done with big V8s, I think is a different matter nowadays.
Well, regardless, provided this happens, I know who we're hiring as our one and only test driver, Vic Elford. So that
absolutely,
we have that sorted out. Where shall we go here as we truly wind down? I think we're over about our hour and a half-ish cap we try and set for ourselves, but where shall we close?
I'm just having a quick look through. The one that we really should get to, because it's another man that's been extremely patient and has actually responded by condensing what had been I think I'm right in saying, Floodman, tiresomely long-winded question that you've actually sent to us previously. You know I'm kidding. This comes back to something that our Reddit friends have got on one of their themes, which is a sports car racing unpopular opinion. is asking what our sports car unpopular opinion is. His is that Toyota should have pulled out last year, along with Porsche, and it would have been more interesting to watch the privateers fight for a season. There's a million and one things, of course, I could say about that. That probably wouldn't have worked in terms of the commercial side of things. A sports car racing unpopular opinion. I guess it depends on what the prevailing opinion is. One that's proved very unpopular with certain people, from me, is that I actually think that in recent years, the Spa 24 Hours, which I used to think was one of the best endurance races on the planet, is now one of the worst because it's been over-regulated. That does not appear to be a particularly popular opinion with very many people in the GT3 racing world. That's me. And Pete, don't know about you.
Oh, mine's easy. Age limit. You can, but not the traditional weed out the old farts. This would be one where we actually say if you are under roughly 21 or so, you cannot participate in endurance racing. You should be trying to advance your career elsewhere. Thing that just makes me sad, Graham, and I might not have the exact age correct, could be 25, I don't know, but I see some of these young guns, and I'm incredibly impressed by them, of course, but with a dual open wheel and sports car background, knowing that so many young drivers start out in open wheel and end up in sports cars because things don't pan out for however long an open wheel, just a part of me that says, come on, keep fighting, little fella. You can make it. What if you had to? What if IMSA said, yeah, I don't care what rating you are. If you're not over this age, you cannot play. So I'm sure that would weed out the Madison Snows and a whole Felipe Nasr turned 26 during summer, in the middle of his prototype championship winning campaign. So if it was 25, I guess I would filter out our one of our new IMSA champions, but I don't know. There's just a part of me that says youth should be in the fastest things possible, and if those things don't work out, then you could become one of those old farty sports car drivers. It does bum me out a little bit when I see supreme talent at a young age, and I'm like, oh man, I want to see you somewhere else. And then we got Colin Brown, who is now like 30 years old or something like that. I don't know, 32.
Is he? Something
like that. And now he's still trying to get to IndyCar. So I don't know. It's not on necessarily just IndyCar. Just to me, youth should be attached to the most extreme performance possible in whatever sporting example. And yeah, so that would be my opinion that I would imagine would be unpopular by some. But if not, I can put more thought into coming up. Trust me, many of the things I say and write are unpopular. I know I can do better.
I think just about everybody under 25 it would be unpopular with. But it's a good way of looking at life, isn't it, the unpopular opinion bit. I think we've got a couple more. Time for a couple more before we nail the lid back on this one, MP. One of them, let's have a quick look. Well, there's two questions that come into one. One from Kinky Mulzan on Reddit, one from Jordan Hotwood, and they come with a common theme. Kinky Mulzan asking what values and tech details of a race car do you think constitutes a sports car? Do you consider GT cars to be sports cars as much as prototypes? Do you think it's necessary to distinguish those terms? How do you get to propose it to approval of a professional linguist? Never let that one bother me. Jordan Hotwood said, may seem like an obvious question. What is sports car racing? Always thought of DTM cars and TCR cars as touring cars, but they can often get included in sports car discussions. You want a first crack at that?
For me, and I get this every now and then from our Anoraki type sports car fans, I've even heard this from a former colleague who prattled on and on about it, that silhouettes aren't sports cars, touring cars aren't sports cars. They're very different things. Prototypes are sports cars of a form, but it's really truly only this, to which I say, shut up. Sports car racing is sports car racing. What's the original intent? Some sort of road car-ish type thing that goes fast and has a sporting element to it. Not a hearse, not a van, not a truck, but a sports car. There's so many iterations within that theme that, yes, a little TCR mobile, even in theory, and I know it's a stretch, but in World Challenge and also the SCCA, they have what they call Spec B that ran for a while, and these are the tiniest, the little Mazda 2s and other things that aspire to have triple-digit horsepower ratings. And you go, look, on no planet would anyone consider that thing a true sports car. I got it. But hey, throw a roll cage in it, knock 100 or 200 pounds off of it by removing all the extra crap, uprate the power a little bit, put on some good tires, and guess what? You got a fun little sports car race. So, to me, it's a blanket term. I just find it silly to get into no, we must carve it up this way. If it's in the general frame of a road car concept, a silhouette that's tube frame prototype that makes us think not open wheel, not a tractor, and not a submarine. It's a sports car, I think, for the most part. So that's how my head works.
I think you're pretty well there. I mean, for me, there's a couple of interesting parallels. One is, despite the fact that so much more in life is vanilla now than it was, we still have got a number of products, racing products, that retain that opportunity for smaller, touring cars to race alongside much quicker GT cars, and in some cases sports prototypes. VLN is one, the Nürburgring 24 Hours, of course. Then you've got, I think Jordan name-checked DTM. Here's an interesting one. Mixed Class does a lot of this as well. I think most people would regard the Super GT Championship as a sports car championship. Most people regard the DTM as a touring car championship. The main difference between the two is that one has got mixed class racing and the other one doesn't. So maybe that's a part of it. I think that the overall, though, ultimately for me, sports car racing, it is about endurance. It is about that mixture of classes and traffic. It's often misunderstood. It is a very broad church, and the less vanilla it gets, the less tiresomely templated it gets, the better. For me, I'm just as thrilled when you can watch something like the Dottinger Ho with a Daihatsu wardrobe coming down it, as I would be, tottering down in a high wind, as I would be with, 4 or 5 cars drafting from the SP9, the GT3s. I think it will be a sad day if we ever get to the point where it's all going to be GT cars. It's all going to be 2-door this or open top that or bubble cockpit the other. For me, variety is absolutely king. And the beauty, one of the things about my racing life that I like so much is that I'm not having to go to every single race with the same rule set, with the same concept, with the same grid. It's what at times can make covering a particular championship slightly tiresome. In that if all you're doing is the same thing with the same people every week, that can at times be a little bit wearing. For me, more the merrier. Touring cars, great. GT cars, great. Sports cars, sports prototypes, great. All of them together, fabulous. That's the way I want my car. Well, there you go. There's car. There's a sports prototype that actually intends to look like a GT car. Then it's going to go all badly wrong, isn't it? We're at the point, MP, where it's about time for, well, effectively, I was going to say the last question. I think it's going to be the last 2 questions. And it's going to be another one from Right Turn Lover. It does have this knack of pulling out entertaining questions. And also, I'm going to wrap in one from Doug Bonham. One of these is particularly for moi, from Doug, who says, what's my favourite part of the trips to Japan? Does the DSC Fun Bus have a Japanese cousin for the trips to Fuji? And the other one from Right Turn Lover, if there'd be circuit safaris at more events, and I should explain what that is for listeners who perhaps don't know, which events implying which tracks and with which fitting mode of transportation? I'll answer Doug first. I love our travels to Japan, and I love it because it is a completely developed nation which is developed in completely bizarre manners that have no relevance whatsoever in terms of car culture and all sorts of other culture to my home country, or indeed yours, MP, and in all sorts of ways. I mean, one of the little pieces of social media activity this last weekend that got an awful lot of traction was just me sending a picture of a vending machine. It was in the hotel of one of the.
That's the best.
It's unbelievable. For 300 yen, which is a couple of bucks, you can have a Lucky Dips selection of fruit themed. So I think we had a watermelon, strawberry, an apple, an orange, and a banana. Hats for your cat. Okay. Now I put something in as a bit of a joke to say I'll take orders. 43 orders I got for that. Unfortunately, the machine was almost empty. But I'm back in 6 weeks for the Asia Le Mans series, and I'm going to go back with a pocket full of yen and an empty suitcase. So if you want a hat for your cat that's throat themed, if you really do like having serious lacerations to your face and arms, then I think that's certainly. I have to say, I have got a banana one. And I did look at, we've got 2 cats in our life, Tango, known to our readers as DSC Cat, and Bear. Bear is badass. And I did look at Bear, and Bear looked at me, and I looked at the hat and looked at Bear, and Bear looked at the hat and looked at me. And his expression was one of pure pity and hatred at that point. So I'm afraid that hat at the moment, I'm going to have to wait till he's asleep and try it, at which point you'll probably hear it from wherever you are. So, Japan, bonkers. The car culture, utterly marvellous. K cars, if you don't know what they are, KEI cars, absolutely fantastic, with the most bizarre range of names for cars you've ever seen in your life. My 2 favourites that I'd not seen before this trip, the Toyota Tank and the Honda That's, including the apostrophe, THAT apostrophe S. Marvellous, marvellous stuff. We've had a range of truly terrible hire cars in Japan, and long may that continue. As for Right Turn Lover, well, Circuit Safari has been a uniquely Japanese thing.
All right.
Circuit Safari
It sounds like the aliens are taking over because we've got crazy static on you out of nowhere.
Would you like me to unplug and plug back in?
Sure. And we're not even going to edit this out. This is real life drama on the Weekend Sports Cars.
And we can try. Is that better?
Hey, look at that. The aliens
there you go.
Have been bested.
So Circuit Safari, you basically, there's a poll, a raffle, if you like, where fans get the opportunity to compete for a seat on a bus. And generally speaking, there's somewhere between 3 and 5 buses, Super GT races. We've done it for the last 2 years now in WEC. The buses go out under escort from the safety cars and circuit intervention vehicles at very low speed, keep to the left of the track, and then they release the cars for a free practice session. And we watched Circuit Safari from the commentary booth, myself, Martin Haven, Alan McNish. McNish was laughing like a mad person. And then he saw the timing screens. And one particular part of Circuit Safari, the quickest cars were lapping, with buses on the track, 1.2 seconds off the times we'd seen in a dry session the previous day. These things, last year I was in one of the buses. It was hands down one of the most amazing things I've ever been involved in. Absolutely spectacular. If you ever get the opportunity to take part in that, please do. Don't be one of the moaning minis that quotes health and safety. The Japanese have been doing this for years. And as long as common sense is actually observed, there's no reason why that shouldn't continue. As for where it should happen and with what vehicle, well, based on the examples we've had throughout this season at the hashtag Home of British Motorsport Silverstone, where if it was possible to do a worse job of resurfacing a circuit, I've absolutely no idea what you'd have to do. But rippling, lack of drainage, so standing water. We've had race meeting after race meeting badly affected. MotoGP cancelled, unable to race. It happened again this weekend with the British LMP3 Cup losing their last round this season to it. So I think the smart-ass answer would be, let's have either one of those duck trucks from World War II or a boat. But of course, there's no point, because no one would be out on the circuit anyway, because it won't drain and nobody can actually race on it. So Something I think nationally appropriate wherever you're actually going to go. I think if you were to send people out for the Bathurst 1000 Circuit Safari, you should be putting some of those fans in the back of a ute. What do you think?
Oh, the ute's perfect, but it would have to be a very skinny ute, because especially once you start to get up onto the mountain, it's not particularly wide, so you'd either have cars going very slow because of that.
Don't want that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a circuit here in the U.S., sports car related, that would be feasible, track width being the key operator, and Daytona comes to mind, just because, could run around on the bottom of the banking, but seeing cars blast by at 190 or whatever at some points, that would probably, there would need to be an onboard bathroom, if not each seat was an actual porta potty seat, because I think folks would be they would be having problems. I like that idea. There's a part of me that also thinks, and I realize it's not Circuit Safari, but maybe it goes even farther, is at Elkhart Lake, at Road America, there's a fairly long setup that they have where you can go up to the top of the gantry, and they attach you with your little harness, and you sail down the long steel fixture there. I would say something like that, but maybe at a Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca, which is now WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, and at some point in time I'll remember that. I would say something fun like that kind of lets you do almost the entire lap, or maybe just the top of the hill from the corkscrew on down alongside the cars. Maybe if it had a little electric motor there, not $2 million per year to lease that, but something that accelerated you along almost like a roller coaster ride, but along the actual course of the track. That might be fun. So not exactly a circuit, but similar.
What about sharing a street luge with Andy Lally through the corkscrew? That'd be quite... That's a bit mad, isn't it?
No, yeah, we're going to stop there. Because he'd beat you up once you got to the bottom if you beat him. So there's some issues there. What do you think? Are we done?
We're done for the week. There's a lot coming, and have a look and give us your opinion on what you read about Car for next week's show. There's a lot more to come. Still plenty of racing still to come, of course, this year. We're not done with the WEC for the season. We're about to kick off in Asia. So Shanghai back-to-back for Asia and the WEC. And lots more to come beyond that. There'll be a lot of news with emerging efforts coming forward for 2019. Keep these questions coming. Love it, love it, love it. Apologies to the few of you who didn't get to this week. If you want them answered, submit them again. We will get to them. Thanks a million. I'm thoroughly enjoying this. I have to tell you, when you're enjoying something, when someone has to remind you you've been doing this for months and months and months. We're now this is month 10. Long may this continue, MP.
Yeah, amen to that. And I would also say that with a huge IMSA season finale, plus also a big and important WEC race, gone over the informal hour and a half we've been trying to limit ourselves to, but we know that there's a little bit of special circumstance here, so thank you for listening in. And I also wanted to save this for the end rather than the front, because I don't want every episode to be a Marshall Talks About Cancer thing. Just wanted to say here at the end, I am starting to run out of words and ways of saying thank you to all of those, many of you and many others who continue to send in wonderful, beautiful words of encouragement, prayers, offer of prayers for my wife. I don't need them. We're trying to fix my lady, but thank you for those who've prayed for me as well. And would just throw in, too, that maybe I'll mention their names once we are done with this process. The folks that I've spoken with just today, we actually had to stop in the middle of the recording here for me to call someone who was available for a limited window, but just the amount of people, plus also some of the folks who you'd go, how did that person orbit into Marshall Pruett's world? Because normally there's no reason for them to talk to an idiot like Pruett. I've just been absolutely stunned by the amount of folks who've said, hey, I'm in this general sphere of cancer, fighting it, have a foundation, have something else, who've reached out, those who've gone through it themselves, have a loved one who have, and have recommendations of someone that I might speak with, a doctor, an advisor. This is something where heavily, very heavily from the IMSA paddock, again, just some pretty amazing people there who have taken this breast cancer fight that my wife and I are going through and almost made it their own. I had one team owner trying to win overall at Petit Le Mans last weekend, Graham. I mentioned this to you,
you did?
Offline. I had that team owner texted me in the middle of the race from the timing stand to say, how's your wife doing? Give me an update. How are things going? What can I do? And it just, again, you're sitting there going, what? You're trying to win one of the biggest races of the year. This is so meaningful, and your sponsors, and you're staring at 20 or 30 people working for you, and you have the heart to stop and think and ask, how's your wife doing? Again, it just, I'm continually struggling to say thank you or to grasp the kindness of folks right now. So that's just amazing. I'll also mention we've been through a rough week or two of meetings with potential, it's usually an oncologist, a surgeon, a radiologist. Those are kind of the three primary folks involved in trying to figure out how to attack whatever is happening. Had a rough couple of weeks we've been at constant appointments and meetings and interviews trying to see who's right, who's wrong, and otherwise. And we finally got some really good direction. We're getting more good direction. I think we're going to head into start really ramping up and getting serious with surgery and all kinds of stuff here very, very soon. So I'll let you guys know as that happens, because that is probably going to knock me offline for a couple of days, at least to start. But anyways, just wanted to save this for the end so that if, all you wanted was the sports cars, you got it, we're good to go. But just thank you. Thank you, and I'll keep saying thank you because it is genuinely the least I could do. And with that, I will save the last word for Mr. Graham Goodwin.
Well, you know what? There's a bit of a message there, isn't there? I'm sitting here with a bit of a lump in my throat, I'll be honest with you. But there's a message there, which is I'll say thank you as well. And I'll say thank you for everybody for their humanity with these things. It's a reminder in what's a divided world, and there is a sporting theme to this point as well, that there's more that actually unites us than divides us. Humanity unites us, and we can all argue whether or not it's the usual bullshit about WEC or IMSA. Who cares? Come on, it's sports car racing. Both are awesome. When it comes right down to it, when actually things start to head in a direction that perhaps we wouldn't like them to do, that's when most of the people we know in this world drop that colour that they're actually holding, take off that shirt that they, pound their chest to, and remember that actually we're just people. It has been awesome to watch this, MP, to watch the kind of the good wishes coming your way and your good lady's way, and we're with you all the way and beyond. And you guys can show us that by sending in more questions next week and keep the boy busy. That's what we want to see. For now, thanks again for your company. Thanks again for the downloads. Thanks again for the good wishes. Thanks again for the questions that keep on coming. And the number of you that keep bumping into me in all sorts of places. I'm sure it's the same with you too, MP, and encourage us to do more and better with these things. There's a lot more coming to the end of this year and way, way beyond that. We're going to be the Week in Sports Cars for as many weeks as we possibly can. For now, from me, Graham Goodwin, and from you, Marshall Pruett, it's the Week in Sports Cars with Marshall Pruett and Graham Goodwin, brought to you by Marshall Pruett.
Cooper Tires. That's right. Thank you, my brother. And as you heard the train in the background, I should move out of the way because I don't want to get run over. With that little bon mot, we will speak to you next week. and ain't life grand?